Okay, this is Linda Bradley, and I'd like to bring the meeting of the Document Review Committee to order at 3:02 p.m.
You need a
As
second?
of, no, I don't. Roll call. There are only 3 of us on the committee, and we are all present for this meeting. So I guess we'll start it off with the first order on the agenda to talk about is board policies. And as secretary of the board, I'm supposed to know where all of the documents are kept. And I started by looking at some of the things that were policies that were missing off the Sudden Valley website. And actually Morgan and I started working on that going, wait a minute, there were out of all of our initial policies, there were like 15 404 errors that were showing up. And as we corrected those little by little by little, we started looking at things. And one of the things that I focused on because of knowing ongoing things was the ACC policies. I found that in many instances, there are policies from back as far as 1996, that sort of thing, where some of these policies have been addressed by bylaws, requirements of state law, or everything else. And I thought it might be a good place for us to start. But I began with ACC policies because I know that there is a real concerted effort on the ACC committee's part with the new chair to do a real revision of the ACC manual again, make some changes, that sort of thing. And so I selected out the actual policies that dealt with the ACC. Once we get done with those and make a recommendation to the board, then ACC can go ahead and we can rescind them from the association policies, and they will go into the ACC's policies manual. And so that's kind of where I want to start and see if we can't move forward with that. And then once we get a decision on those, decide to pick which ones we feel, maybe some of the older ones we have that, or some that we've looked at that we go, hey, wait a minute, that's in the bylaws already, of policies that we know are no longer valid, or either have state law or our bylaws that override them and make them invalid anyway. So why have them any longer? The last time that I know of that a large number of policies were removed were in 2016, but I think it's only been little by little that we have removed them. I've asked with some things coming forward, like the code of conduct and the grievance procedure, which the board is currently looking at, to be turned into policies. We sometimes do this by resolution, but then the resolutions are lost. There's no trail, and they end up being lost. And then everybody reinvents the wheel. That recently happened with the appeals process. And so we're going to try and make sure that if there's things that we need policies for that govern behaviors within the organization, that we do them as policies to make sure that they're not just lost somewhere. So anyway,
that's a great idea.
It's the whole point. It's like we have this stuff, and if you don't put it down somewhere that people can go back and refer to it, they get lost. And we spend enough time sometimes reinventing the wheel, and I think it's time to try and bring some clarity to that. So we'll continue to look at policies, but we're going to start today with several ACC policies. And I'm simply gonna go through them by number. And the first one I have is from 1996. It's policy number 1996.17, regards building permits. And what they wanted to do is to adopt the resolution entitled Building Permits Delinquent Members. I don't know. I know that we have in our bylaws the definition of a member in good standing. Although I do not know if ACC, if somebody wants to develop a vacant lot, whether it's an owner or a builder-owned lot, if they check with accounting and make sure these people are members in good standing. I know sometimes people, if they have vacant lots, can become delinquent easily. They don't live here, and it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. But it's a question that it's probably the one that I have no idea, number one, if it's legal for us to deny development of a lot if you're not a member in good standing. And number two, I have no idea if the ACC actually looks up to discover if someone is in good standing when they make their application to build. So I guess I would say for me, there's 2 points that would need to be dealt with. Number one, can Sudden Valley require someone to be in good standing before they allow their application before the ACC? And number two, do they ask? Is this a part of a process that ACC follows? So does anyone have anything else?
Well, I was gonna say, that point two, where the general manager furnishes a ACC a current listing of delinquent members, does that go on?
I'm not sure. See, that's why I'm saying there's some things I'm really not familiar with, because it's not written down anywhere real clearly.
I can tell you that Joel Carter, our new construction coordinator, does not have access to C3, but he can check with Gil. And probably what triggers that is the deposit, the $10,000 deposit. When Gil gets it, he would look to see if somebody is in arrears.
Yeah, it's just because the whole thing is, oh, I see what you're saying. Because it states in this policy that then the whole time that you build, you have to remain a member in good standing.
Right.
And
so they give a $10,000 deposit to start work. So
yeah,
when Gil got that check and he would apply it to their account, he would see if they owed thousands in back, in
it might be
dues.
an interesting thing to check up on and
I
see.
can ask Gil at what point that happens. I know Joel doesn't do it because he doesn't have access to C3,
Yep,
but some part of the process triggers Gil to do it.
Okay, will put that as something that Morgan is going to follow up on. Because the other thing is I will probably ask Joanne, I think this is the only one, but it might not be, that really should go to legal, because how do I say it? It's not, our bylaws aren't very specific, other than saying, if you're not a member in good standing, a lot of things, permissions can be refused. So anyway, so as far as I'm concerned, that's one item. So then we're gonna go on to policy number 1996.21. And that's the policy about easements, encroachments, and vacations. And I know that there's a special meaning in terms of building that has to do with vacations because it's an unusual term. But it says, and I don't, to my knowledge, this has never been done, that periodically there shall be published in the Sudden Valley Views a prepared notice by legal counsel that the association will not allow private encroachment on SVCA property and will not recognize adverse possession rights. I get that, but I know that there are times when people wish to create an extra parking spot in front of their house that requires them to do encroachment. And I believe there's a form that deals with that. Morgan might be able to correct me about this, but I think that there is actually a form that gets filled out that is considered then a permit to do the work. And there are guidelines in there that someone has to follow when they're doing this. But I'm not certain. I know that that when buildings are considered, new builds are considered, there are easements and that sort of thing that have to do with if you do put an extra parking spot on one side of your lot. Usually it's in the front of the lot. For me, it's on the side of my lot. And I would want to look into this because to my knowledge, we have, as long as I've lived here, I've never seen anything like this published.
Neither have I.
Jean, I don't know if you've ever, I don't know, did you ever serve on ACC, Jean?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I want to check. I don't believe we don't do this anymore. I've never seen anything published in the views. And I know that sometimes we have been doing different things to allow people to build on their lots. Sometimes it has to do with mitigating, whereby if they have to mitigate building on their lot, we allow them we allow them to another lot, although we're not crazy about doing that, to consider mitigation by leaving in green space. And I'd like to follow up on this a little bit longer and come back to you guys on this because, and I know I need to look up what vacations means because it's a specific term. And unfortunately, there is no additional language with this policy. But I think it's one that we could easily rescind. Any comments from anybody?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that with issues we've had, like there was one person that they thought they were building a little shack or something. Does it make a difference if we start doing this? People trying to build on Sudden Valley property or property they don't own, does that help us in any legal way to help move them off? Or does it just not make any difference?
I think it's something that would have to be reported. And I think the instance you're talking about was by people that live there. And it's people it's like sometimes I think that people feel they can come in here. They think they know where their property is. There's a process that you need to know for, where is my property, the size of house or dwelling you're allowed to build. Because in theory, the first thing you build is your dwelling before you build any, detached extra building or that sort of thing on your property. And I think that's pretty clear. I know that they've been with the attorney. I think that's kind of been resolved, at least the one instance that we have of it. There are times in the past, there's a question of, you know, where's the edge of a lot, and getting surveys and knowing where your lot lines are. You know, now there's kind of a rule that says you have to have a survey, and the county comes out and looks at things before that's ever done. You know, true, you still can move those little magic posts, but you, at least there's a ruling there where I'm not so sure if that was set in stone originally, because there's lots of houses that are really close on their property, closer on their property lines than they should be. But I just, you know, some of that's been grandfathered in because it was in the past, and there may not have been the descriptions that are in the current policy. So, but anyway, I'm gonna take a look at seeing about getting rid of this easements and encroachments policy. I just don't think we have ever done it. And I don't know that it's anything, I don't know that it's anything that would make any difference whether we published or not. You know,
Maybe
if you know, if somebody doesn't read a certain issue of the Views, does it make a difference? It's almost something that belongs in the ACC policies clearly stated. You know,
Yeah.
what, you know, how do we, I think there's, like I say, there's a form for easements, and I'm gonna see what ACC has more, but I know sometimes you can find stuff throughout there. For me, with easements, the only thing I found really easily was that form that's online where a lot of the ACC stuff is stored. Okay, moving right along, policy number.
Linda, I was gonna
Go
say,
ahead.
the only reason to consider having it published is because I really think a lot of people, when they move here new, they don't really, a lot of them don't really think to look at really what all is required to live here, or whatever all is, you know, in our ACC rules. And I think that causes a lot of problem, and it's just another way to get information out to people. That's all I was gonna say about that.
That's true. It's, you know, and maybe there is a reason to validate that, you know, to validate that. Is it something that our legal counsel has to do? Or is it just probably you would have them look at it once. It's a legal notice that's then there, and then quarterly or whatever, you publish it in the Views.
Yeah, just, you know.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, because I was just thinking like for adverse possession and encroachments as, you know, different than easements, because easements, people are actually probably looking at that when they're building or doing something. But it's the encroachments and adverse possession rights that would be more people need to be aware of as well.
So that's another one we're going to bring to legal's attention. Get something from the board and a little bit of permission there, get Joanne to work with this and see. That's maybe not a dumb thing. It would be a one-time thing to the attorney to develop this document, and then periodically it would be our responsibility to see that it's published.
Yeah,
And that's not unreasonable at all, you know?
yeah.
Okay, so policy number 199801, trees cutting and limbing. There's there's this beautiful one line, and then there's a thing on the back where they did a summary of the and it only deals with limbing on SVCA property. And I believe there's a whole section in the ACC manual about taking trees already off of SVCA property. Currently, as a lot of people know, it hasn't been members doing it. It's been the valley doing it when notified by members that we have hazard trees on our common properties. that are posing a threat to homes. And we've been trying to keep track of it for the last 2 years, 3 years. Last year, we took way beyond our budget of $75,000 out in hazard trees. If I'm not mistaken, we're talking over $100,000 was spent. The year before, we spent our budget, plus we took twice from the undesignated reserve to remove hazard trees. Right now, we used to have a list and you could work through the list, but because we're developing so many, because we are an aging forest and people are building in here, we're finding that we're getting lots of notes from people to do that. If I'm not mistaken, the last time I asked the general manager, we were very, very close to our limit for the year. And unfortunately, in forming the budget for 2024, we reduced the amount of hazard trees from 60 or 75,000 down to 50.
Oh, wow.
And so we're declining with the thought that if we need the extra money, the trees have to come down, and we would then take from UDR. It's a discussion that hasn't been had by the board yet, but most definitely needs to be taken by the board, because we're barely into the 3rd month of the year. And if we're at that limit already, it's getting more expensive to take down the trees. And we need to get a plan and a method of how do we deal with this. But I certainly think that this policy could be removed, because we now have a really complete description in ACC about hazard trees. And I think that certainly supersedes this policy, which, like I say, we're talking 1998. And at that time, we had tons of vacant lots. We currently have, I think, only around we have less than 400 vacant lots available to be developed anymore.
Well,
And I just don't know that this belongs there. I think the more full description of hazard trees, how you deal with them. I know that now with permitting, and if I understand staff correctly, and I stand corrected if I'm wrong, you don't have to get a permit to remove a hazard tree if it's an eminently hazardous tree. I think you can apply for it afterwards. You need to take pictures, that sort of thing, to be able to provide proof to the county of what you did, but that you don't have to wait for a permit from them.
I think that's true.
If it's a hazard tree.
Yeah. Well, the
So-
two things that stuck out to me on this one was the ACC tree committee, which I'm pretty sure we don't have a tree committee anymore. And that they were preparing a recommendation for the consideration of the board of directors for these trees. Well, we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about trees, stuff that doesn't need to come to the board. So I think you're right, this one can go.
Yeah, I
Is it-
agree. I think it's just a redundancy.
It really is, and I think that if anything, where the discussion will come with the board is, how do we afford this? They're beautiful trees and they're wonderful to have, but it's just between the really wet weather that sometimes, and the windy weather, that causes them to topple over. You now have some of these drier summers that the trees sometimes look really healthy, but they're very dry. And I think that this is something that we just let ACC move forward with. I think that, you know, and it could be that the county will come to us with more regulations too, with being in the watershed and everything else. So I think we asked that this be able to be rescinded
Agree.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
just, okay, thank you. And next, we have policy number 2001-6, ACC recommendations. It says the Board of Directors authorizes the general manager to approve ACC recommendations provided they are in accordance with existing ACC guidelines and SVCA bylaws. And strangely enough, the next one that we're going to look at after that deals with authorization for the AC manager to approve basic requests.
Now, would that
I'm
be
not-
Daniel or Joel Carter? Do you know who that would be referring to? Would that be the ACC chair, or would it be someone like Joel Carter they're referring to?
See, that's where I'm not sure because we don't have an ACC manager. And even if I look at some of the information online, which is there, they refer to a coordinator, and we no longer have an ACC coordinator. We're
Is that
kind
the
of looking
ACC?
at
That's what the
bringing
AC
that
standard
back.
for? Oh,
Pardon?
that's what AC standard for, was coordinator, architect coordinator or something, architectural coordinator?
No, ACC is architectural control. And then we
Wow.
used, for many years, we had a coordinator. And
Okay.
then that position was done away with. They've been looking at taking on board an environmental planner. And I think that's still up for discussion. We used to have a coordinator that currently there is a staff person that handles the responsibilities of the coordinator, but is just an administrative specialist. Am I right about that, Morgan? Can you confirm that? I don't know if she's listening still. But I don't know, you know, you're asking the general manager.
Hi, it's me. I was muted.
That's fine.
So Diane and I are both administrative specialists twos, and we split the work where she primarily does ACC and then I do other stuff.
Okay.
So because that just is better to works out that way.
Yeah,
So
and
we don't have, so as far as the way that policy is written, I think they're talking about where Joanne like can approve ACC requests, like if you're getting your roof replaced and you're replacing like with like, then you can just bring it to Joanne. It doesn't need to go before the full committee.
yeah, and
if you-
see what's strange is there's that other policy that comes, it's 2006-03 that deals with that coming to the architectural control manager. But then in the actual, here's where it gets really interesting. In the actual ACC policies, it says that they come to the ACC coordinator.
Yeah,
So we've got it going all over the place.
I noticed in some other old documents, they mention an ACC manager.
Yeah.
So
And indeed, there used to
yeah.
Joel Carter. Well, he isn't really. There
No,
really
he's a
isn't
new
anyone.
construction coordinator.
Yeah, there really isn't anyone here that would really fill the definition of an ACC manager. There isn't that person anymore. And it's just, you know, part of it, I would hope that to leave some of this with ACC and in their capable hands, they work through some of this stuff to where you and I looked at this, Morgan. It's that document that talks about guidelines, ACC.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look within that, it gives this two lists, wonderful lists, and they're numbered, they're clearly defined, they're all in one place. It gives a list of things that do not have to come before the ACC for review. There's 18 of them. And then there is a list of 11 that require ACC approval. I actually love the document. It's
Yeah, I like
just-
that it spells it out. This is what we need.
And clearly, you don't have to look through the whole ACC manual to find, well, what do I need and what don't I need? I think there should be, and it might be interesting to, I don't know how if there is a way to describe both of these two policies into one entity that's kind of, how do I say it? Someone that can walk into the office, say, I have this, it fits, I want to paint my house. I just want to repaint it the colors that it was. Here's the colors that it was. Here's the colors that I want.
Here's what we do. If you come in and you do that, and the
Mhm.
color that it was is an ACC approved color, then Joanne signs it. If the
Okay.
color that it was required ACC approval, then it goes back to the ACC.
Yeah, I ran into that problem with my house. I had the house color that I wanted for my trim was actually a body color, and because it was trim and approved originally, so they approved it this time, but it had to go back to ACC.
So, like, however you want to phrase that, you could say the circumstances under which Joanne can sign and just list those.
Does how do I say it? So in the next one, that 2006-03, it kind of lists some basic things, 4 of them. Is there a way to combine the 2001-6 and the 2006-03 with approved basic requests?
Yeah, I think you just need to add to the list. You'd have to go before the board with the new amended memo, but yeah.
And then
Yeah.
just make that, if these are brought into the office, because you still have to submit the request,
Right.
but that it can be signed off on, and it's somebody in the office.
Yeah,
We may end up with the coordinator again, or we end up with Joanne. But the way it is now, it's like what if Joanne isn't there someday?
Right. You could
Or what
say
if we don't
something
have,
like,
what if, lately general managers have been hard to come by. I don't mean to make fun, but we've gone through such a list of them for that general manager. Let's say you have a temporary general manager in here. They're not going to know that, but there will be office personnel who would be able to sign off on it.
right.
Something to think about. Any other thoughts from anybody?
The only thing I can think of, if you want to change it to one document, you could do where it says the architectural control manager may approve. You could make
Mhm.
that number 1, then A, B, C, and D, and then number 2 could be the board of directors authorizes the general manager, and then a list. And then you could make it, then it could be one policy.
And I think they're kind of the same thing, but it's just, I can see where it'd be nice to have the general manager do it. But like I say, what if I'd like to do it in such a way is that, and maybe you can say that it may be approved by administration. Do we,
I think the way that they phrase it is they say it doesn't require ACC committee approval.
Mhm.
And then we can work out in a business,
How you
decision,
deal with it
how you do with it
accordingly.
accordingly, but just knowing that it doesn't need to go before the committee.
Ooh, good point, good point.
Which is basically kind of what those 4 points are saying under architectural
Yep.
control manager.
And there's
Yes.
really, if you look at the one document online, it's the nicest. If you'd like, Jean and Timmy, I can send you a link to that.
Yeah.
What's the number on, actually, on the bylaws right here? What's the number of it?
How do I say it? It's not a number. We're looking at 2001-6 and 2006-03. And it's
Okay.
like, I'd like to combine them. They basically say the same thing.
Yeah,
It's just, it's what things do not require ACC approval.
right. Yeah, I got that. Okay, yeah.
And I think what I'd like to do is somehow combine those two with language, maybe flesh it out a little bit more, but at least put it there or be able to, because see, the thing that's scary and that I wish, therefore I will wave my magic wand, that the ACC policies actually were as clear as this document online. And I think I will send you guys a link to that and you'll see how really clear it is and how nice it is. It's so simple, to explain, and to the point that both Jean and Timmy have made, is that there needs to be a place where there's a simple list of things rather than combing through 20, almost 30 pages of you can do this, you can't do this, and it rules the whole gamut. To have that list is really nice. So I think what we're going to try and do is combine these two and see if we can't figure something out with Morgan's good help and bring back to our next meeting something that might be more in keeping with people just being able to give people a summary of this stuff. And that there are over-the-counter approvals that can be done. Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yep.
Yep.
Jean?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, last but not least, my very favorite one. So back in 2018, we realized that there's a couple places, but most of it comes under the ACC policies 14.7. It's what contractors can and should and shouldn't do. The general manager is planning, and I think it's coming up here in, I don't know. She gave a date and I can't remember what
I
it
thought
was.
it was this week, I know the
It's-
volunteer one is tomorrow, but I thought the contractors were meeting this week.
I can't remember what she said. I don't remember. But I think it's a good idea that, for people that are even already, if you're already building in here, or if you're planning on building in here, because we're going to be rolling up on that pretty soon, where, people are going to be submitting permits for new construction. And when that happens, they should have a clear impression of what's expected. And
Yeah.
it's like, sometimes it'll be, and so anyway, this policy got developed and it had to do with related activities. And I think it was because many times there was noisy work went on after 7 in the evening or things like that. I think there wasn't a really strict rule for concrete. And when contractors have to, when they do some of these large pours, that they now are required to contact neighbors that are directly affected, either across the street, next door, you know, if it's a cul-de-sac and people might not be able to get in and out, or if they're gonna, you know, if they're gonna have, if they're gonna impact a main road, if they're building on something like Sudden Valley Drive or Harbor View, that they need to have adequate flagging and notice. Notice the association needs to be notified. If you've noticed lately, you will find in the announcements when administration is notified of when there will be partial road closures, et cetera. Sometimes for concrete pours of one kind or another, or possibly when trusses are delivered for a really large house and you have those giant trucks in here. Oh my gosh. But it's like, I really want this whole policy and the forms that were created with this policy to go into the ACC manual, their policies.
Mhm.
This is where it belongs. Currently, it says in that section that a contractor reads, see policy, board policy, blah, 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 blah. Well,
It
then,
does. It's under
know.
14.71 hours of operation. It says Seaboard Policy 2018-03. But I know that last year, there was a new policy. I don't even know where it is that cut the hours down by 1 hour.
But I don't think it was
But it
anything that
doesn't-
was ever approved by the board,
I
unless it's, you know, that's the
It
thing.
was,
Unless
it
this
was,
is-
it was a bylaw change or something. But my point being that there is, it says here, the hours of operation, see board policy, and then it doesn't tell you where to go to get that policy. It just says
Exactly.
like
And if
you
you're a
can't find it.
contractor,
Yeah.
and that's why this whole thing, whatever hours they put on it,
Should be in here.
because eventually, if they completely redo the architectural control policies, they have to bring the whole thing before the board,
Right.
because unless the board approves it, it's not valid. You know, I know
Right.
there's been some discussion about, there's some, I think currently the amount of deposit and the amount of fees for building vary. I don't know if that's a good thing anymore, but it's a discussion that needs to be had. And if it isn't, then we need to change that. Then if you change the policy, you have to change the fine and fee schedule, et cetera. And, you know, it's like there's a whole thing that needs to be changed. It isn't just, you can't change it in just the policies and not change it in the fee schedule.
Right.
But anyway, I think from what Morgan said, I hope that Timmy and Jean, you both can kind of understand that it's like there's some of this stuff that isn't real clear. That if we say that we believe this should go in the policy, in the ACC policy book, then that gets put on them to do it. I think there's a real push to get that done this year, but I haven't talked with Daniel very much, and I probably should. I sent him a copy of the different policies that we were going to be discussing, and I'll get back in touch with him once we get done with this. But this last policy regarding contractors, I believe needs to go into the ACC policies. I don't know if some of this language, and probably Morgan can address that more clearly, is duplicative of some stuff that's already written in there
Oh,
under the way that the contractors are to work. But once again, that would be for ACC to look at and get rid of the duplicative language.
Yeah, I actually
Right.
had a few questions on this document, so
Okay,
well, I just think it needs to be looked at like this again. Like, I mean, it talks about fines, but are the fines defined somewhere? It's not defined in this documents.
It's not defined in the ACC manual, but there is a fine and fees schedule. And in there, defined in there.
Okay. Yeah, so, just so that people know where to look.
It might not be a bad idea to attach a document to this that had only the ACC fines. Like you don't need the pool fees and everything else,
Oh,
but
good idea. Good
Yeah.
idea, Morgan. It's not for us, but excellent, excellent idea.
yeah, because we have those, we can easily crop them out and make a document with just the ACC related fees.
That'd
Because
be great.
that's an excellent idea, Morgan. Because that way, if there's some, like here at the very last point that I think Jean was referring to, fines will be assessed for failure to notify the defined surrounding properties.
I think
Yeah.
the reason they've left that off probably is because they didn't want to have to update the whole document every time a fee got changed. But honestly, those fees don't get changed much.
No, they really don't, not
they
the
really don't.
ACC, not
would
the
just be nice-
ACC ones.
Yeah.
It would just be
They
nice
need
to
a good
record
hard
where you can
look.
find the fines.
Yeah, I think that's like an obvious inclusion.
Mhm.
Who is a construction advocate? Communication requirement with construction advocate. Who is a construction advocate?
That would be Joel Carter.
Okay, all right. I didn't realize that was a defined position.
I
Okay.
mean, he is the Diane, what's Joel's official title?
She's asking, you must be in the office.
Architectural Control Inspector is his official title.
Okay. Okay, no, that's
So
fine.
that's good because it doesn't limit his work to just new construction.
Yeah, when somebody says, go talk to the construction advocate, I'd like, who's a construction advocate? Who would that be? No, and I agree. I think you're right, Morgan. I'm not disagreeing. It's just,
Yeah.
maybe it needs to be defined what his title actually is. But again, this is somebody else can, I'm getting kind of in the weeds here. I just think this document needs to be looked at and redone a little bit.
And the thing that's I don't know if this title they gave here is what that person was called before. I think it was. And I don't know how you get around that, but I know Joel's been doing that for how many years now? 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, something like that. He's actually an independent contractor, but we've been also using him not only for new builds and working with them toward, I think he's also, hasn't he, Morgan, been doing, going around a little bit, making sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, or is somebody else doing that?
No, he's doing that as well, which is why the Architectural Control Inspector is a proper title, because he's not just working with new construction. If there's a problem with some construction or any kind
Yeah,
of,
if he's an
fine.
advocate, it's, what he's doing is advocating for the association and saying, hey, you will do this.
Well, and also too, like if you're new and you have a new construction you want to do, he makes appointments and meets with you and looks
Yes.
at your plans and tells you this is going to be a problem, or I can tell you right now, this driveway is too small, or whatever, your elevation's off, so that you can fix that before you go before the ACC and you don't have to do a bunch of back and forth. So in that way, he really is an advocate because he's helping you move through the process.
Yes. So I think we've made it through our business here for the next time.
One more question, Linda, and again, it might seem like kind of an ignorant question, and I apologize if that's the case. But why aren't all these ACC policies just in the ACC area instead of this list of policies? Why can't they just all be moved over to the ACC area where people go, okay, I have an ACC question, I'll just go there and look at it?
And they should be, it's where, some of this, it's just, kind of when you look at the list of policies, they are all lumped together. But once again, I think that times have changed, and I think as we start going through some of these other policies, we're going to look at some of this and see that there's far more fleshed out descriptions now in the bylaws or in state law. The RCWs, there's been a huge change to, we used to be under just 6438, no problem, it was just HOAs. They have recently redone the RCW that we were formed under, and that reads almost like our bylaws. The change is huge.
But
there's
also
lots-
too, I think, Jean, that part of the reason is in the hierarchy of governing that certain things outrank each other, right? So in descending order, policies supersede bylaws. Well, bylaws are trump.
bylaws supersede the
Bylaws trump,
policy.
yeah, bylaws trump policies. So that I think that that's kind of why they made them all policies of the HOA, and then they have like then depending on where they apply. So that's why the policies live in like a policy document.
Right, yeah, okay. It just seems like they're all ACC related and they could somehow just be out over there in a group of ACC stuff, but
And Jean, initially, that's where most of these are gonna go.
yeah,
That's exactly where they're gonna go. The one that I have the most question about is this first one, this building permits and the member in good standing. I don't know, like I say, don't know if it's checked. That's easy enough for me to follow up with staff on. On the other hand, to me, there's a question that I'm gonna add, first I'm gonna find out, before we agree to hear somebody's plans and let them submit it and be heard before the ACC, do they check at that time if a member is in good standing?
right,
Because if they are, that's something simple, once again, that would be put in the ACC manual that you need to. I know, just, there's times, I don't know, because none of us get to see that, do any of these builders who may take an extended amount of time, in theory, building is supposed to be completed in 1 year, is it, or do they have 2 now, Morgan?
1
Do you
year.
know? 1 year?
Mhm.
And any time before you come back, once you expend that 1 year permit, you have to you pay, I think it's a minimal amount of money to the county unless they've raised it. I think it used to be $100. You have to get an extension permit.
Yes.
we have a,
And-
wow, okay,
But it's like, I think that there comes a time that if people are going a long time, is it possible that some people don't remain in good standing? Once again, it's somebody policing it, but it's kind of like when you commit to being on a committee or anything, you have to be a member in good standing and you have to maintain that good standing.
right,
So I'm going to look at this thing about the building permits. And I think and I'm going to also ask if I can get something on this, the policy where we publish periodically in the views, and just get a document that can live for forever and just needs to be inserted by staff periodically in the views. That is that notice about regarding encroachments and adverse possession.
right,
So it's just that, those are the 2 things I really want to come before legal with. And then the rest of this, I think, is real clear. I think we're going to look also, and maybe we can all work together on this combination of policy 200603 and 2001, and just make it so that somehow an over-the-counter approval can be done through administration. If you're simply, if it's considered regular normal maintenance and it's like for like. We'll bring that back, talk about it, see if we can do that and combine those two together. All of this stuff will have to come before the board. But I think that we can do a little bit of work on this and get something cranked together. So that being said, we need our next meeting. I'd like to meet again in April, ladies. Are Wednesdays good for everybody? I think, Jean, didn't you say it was either Mondays or Wednesdays?
Yeah, they usually work pretty well for me.
Because I think I'm going to ask Morgan, I'm going to advocate for staff here. I think Mondays can be really a difficult day.
Mondays can be busy at the beginning and the end of the month.
Yeah. So could we say we'd like to meet again on, let's say, the 24th of April, same time?
That
Perfect.
one works for me.
April 24th. Yeah, that works.
Yeah, I
Okay.
get back the day before, so I'm good.
And 3 p.m.
Okay.
Okay,
All
ladies,
right.
I'll probably be reaching out to you all. I'll try and work with Morgan a little bit and just some of these documents and get them turned into Word and see if we can't, especially the one we want to combine, and see if we can't put something together that makes everybody happy. So that being said, Morgan, I would like to adjourn this meeting at 3:59 p.m.
Perfect. Okay.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Morgan.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you,
Bye.
Morgan. Take
All
care.
right.
Okay,
Bye.
bye, everybody.
Bye.